You need to make a band. You look great, by the way. Thank you. But if you want to just introduce yourselves and give some examples.
My name's Andy Wolf, and I'm the evening shift supervisor. This is Stephanie Morris. She's the day shift supervisor over at Douglas County Youth Services in the Juvenile Detention Center. I know Steph hates doing presentations with me because I don't stop talking ever. Matt explained to me that I've got about an hour and a half this morning.
Oh yeah, another couple hours.
So if anybody needs to, so I just want to give a few examples of kind of our experience with PBS at Youth Services. We've been using it officially since April of 2012. It dovetailed really nicely with our program that we already had. We have a token economy system, so kids, they have privileges that are based on the amount of money they have on their checkbook sheet. When they do something bad, they lose money. When they do something good, they earn money. That's kind of the basic of it. That program worked really well for us for a long time, but we found out about PBS and decided to see what we could do to kind of fill out the positive side of things. You know, a lot of corrections management has to do with the punitive side, being reactive to kid behaviors. We wanted to try to be proactive. So how many of you can think of a time when you come on shift and you overlap with the previous shift and you know that there's a kid that's got some problem that's ongoing and you can see where that train is headed and that the kid's going to be a problem tonight? You think of situations like that probably on a daily basis, right? So to me, what PBS has done for us is that has given us tools to start intervening early in that kid's behavior before it ever gets to that point where you're going to have, I guess you call them codes or incidents, uses of force, locked isolation, stuff like that. You know, everything that we've done with PBS has been focused on, you know, let's increase the amount of tier 1 interventions, so those are the universals, the things that everybody's getting. Let's increase the tier 2 so that way we can stop a kid from progressing. If we can stop that tier 1 kid from getting into tier 2, then great, I don't have behavior problems with it. If I can stop that tier 2 kid from going into the tier 3 when I have to put my hands on them or lock them in a room, then great, I have, you know, reduced liability for the facility. I made my night a lot easier now because I don't have to deal with that. And it makes it just honestly a much more pleasant place to work, to come in and not have to think, well, you know, how many kids am I going to have to, you know, break up from a fight tonight? We're pretty small compared to you guys. I don't know exactly your licensing capacity. We're licensed for 18 kids. I know it's great for me to say, you know, this is what it's supposed to do for you. This is what it's going to do for you. The bottom line that you probably are going to ask is, does it actually work? Have we had outcomes that have actually been positive? And the bottom line is yes, we have. We've started tracking. I know Matt doesn't want me to get too much into the data side of things right now, but we collect lots and lots of data. That's what PBS is. It's data-driven decision making. And we've been watching our tier percentages, and we've been watching it over the last few years shift from about 1/3 of kids are always in the universal tier, 1/3 of kids are in the, you know, the at-risk tier, and then another 1/3 of kids are the high-risk kids. We've seen a shift where we're getting more and more kids shifted down to the lower tiers, so we're not experiencing as many severe behaviors as we've seen before. We've seen our use of locked isolation has decreased drastically. On average, a kid will spend no more, I think our last quarter stat, we check them on a quarterly basis, no kid spends more than about an hour and a half in locked isolation on average. We've also seen a decrease in restraints over years. Previous to implementing PBS, we were having anywhere from like 20, 25, 30 restraints a year, something about 2 a month or more. So far this year, we've had 6, I think. So we're at like basically half the rate that we're at before. So we are seeing these concrete reductions in what's going on. And like I said, PBS isn't about, you know, wiping the slate clean on what you're doing currently. It's about getting PBS to work with what you're doing. So let's talk about some examples here. Check in, check out. So that's a tier 2 intervention. So these are kids that are at-risk behaviors. They're starting to act up, but they've not gotten to a point where they're acting up bad enough that I need to truly seclude them by putting them in isolation or put my hands on them. What we found is we use a consequence called day room restriction. We use that 1 day room, and if a kid has continual behavior issues and our tier 1 interventions are working, they get an extended timeout from the floor. They're not locked in their room, but they're unable to be part of the group, they're unable to participate in activities. And so what we found was our expectations for those kids were to, stay in their room. They weren't to come through their doorway and be constantly pestering staff. They were supposed to be quiet, on task in their room. And what we found is when we started looking at our numbers was that the kids that were on day room restriction, we weren't making our 5-to-1 ratio with them at all. We were finding them, taking money from them at a much higher rate than we were actually giving money to them. So we looked at our program and said, why is this happening? And we realized it's because of kind of the expectations we had set and how we were handling them. That the only way for a kid to get detention was to be not following expectations. That's negative attention. If any of you are parents, kids love to get negative attention, right? So what we decided to do was rather than be reactive and giving them negative attention, we wanted to be proactive and give them positive attention. So check in, check out is, I think it's used commonly in schools for PBS. We adapted it to work for us, where every so often we actually go over to that kid unsolicited where they're doing their day room restriction, and we have them check in on what their behavior's been like. We review the expectations, and if they say, yeah, I've been doing that, we say, yeah, we agree with you, we give them feedback. So they basically went from getting negative attention constantly and losing money to we're going over there and constantly reinforcing the things they're already doing. And so now our kids on day room restriction are our best behaved kids, because all they have to do is follow expectations in the room, be quiet, and they're going to earn free money. So that's been really successful for us. This says 4-to-1 ratio. We're actually doing a 5-to-1 ratio. We really focus in on that when we're talking to staff about let's make sure we're getting these positive stuff. And it may sound like a lot at first, but just like they were experiencing over in foundations, it has turned out that it's really easy for staff to meet that 5-to-1 ratio. I would say most staff are way past it, anywhere from 10-to-1 to 20-to-1. That's probably been the easiest part of implementing PBS for us. Who all loves staff evaluations? Okay. So, yeah, I know nobody really likes them, but unfortunately they're like a necessary part of every job you're going to work. At this point, PBS has become entrenched enough that it's part of our detention culture now. It's part of what we do. And so we're at a point now where PBS, how you're doing in PBS, if you're completing the interactions that we want with the kids, then you're going to, that's going to be reflected on your evaluation. It has become like that much of a core part of what we do. That this is part of, the expectation for your job. And so we've had, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. Most people at this point have said, you know what, I wasn't really excited about having to do the extra work and having to do this extra stuff, but I see the benefits and I like it now. There are still a few people that didn't like it, and that, it's kind of the old guard that have been around for a long time that were interested. But, once it becomes part of your staff evaluation, that's a pretty big incentive to work the program too. So in terms of data collection, we track volumes and volumes and volumes of data. It's everything comes out of data. Because as a supervisor, if I sit in my office and I watch the floor out there, I say, I think this is what's happening. Well, that's just my opinion. That's anecdotal. I don't know what's actually happening. And that's why I just want to reinforce what they were saying earlier, is that when they're actually soliciting feedback on how to improve the program, the most useful feedback we've had comes from staff. Because you people are going to be the ones that are out there actually working the program, that are actually having the interactions with the kids, that are finding out what works and what doesn't work. And so what we've started doing is we reach out to our staff when we're looking at making the program changes and saying, hey, this is what we're seeing. Tell us what you think, and tell us how you think we can fix it. And some of our best changes have actually been staff generated. Staff created a new orientation process for new kids coming in that's based on more peer orientation with the kids. And it's been really effective. It's worked really well, and it's something that line staff came up with. And so you have a lot of power and a lot of knowledge and experience that is going to be critical to implementing PBS at Johnson County. Does anybody have any, in collaboration with the schools, we work very closely with the local school district, USD 497. They actually have classrooms at our detention center. And so we're kind of all doing the same sort of thing. And it's important to have that consistency across the board. So that way what's happening in the detention area is the same thing that's happening in the classrooms.
And that's also, and you guys have done some great work like with your school district and others, working on, remember I was talking about that tier 3 and being able to transition those kids out, hopefully with a little better support so they don't come back. I mean, every time a kid leaves, I know you guys, gain some relationships with these kids, and you kind of know, and you don't want them to come back. You want them to stay put, have a good life. You want them to and some of them, you know, probably earning back, you know, and so having that collaboration in schools and using that common language, common terminology, common interventions just increases the likelihood that that kid might be able to actually plug into something that's working, you know, that can get him back where he needs to be and get him the skills and supports he needs. Great.
Does anybody have any questions about things that we've done over there, or how effective it's been, or anything?
I wanted to add to a couple things just from having talked to you guys so the staff evaluation, just to be clear, it's not meant to be like a big hammer over your head like it's going to drop if you don't do what we say. I mean, it's meant to do, I think a good point, the point is like that you talked about, that it's a fun work environment and that's part of the culture, so that's really what they look at. So it's like, it makes sense. So just as an organization, they're looking at good data, they want to make sure that you guys are getting kind of scored on what you're actually doing and how you're supporting individuals so that you're getting that reinforcement for that. And then I think that another point to just add on is your positive to negative ratio. Dave, I heard your Dave's presentation, and well, when we do the actual training, we'll get some more information from you guys, so you'll hear more details about how it's implemented in examples, and then also specifically how it's going to work here when that training is ready after we continue to get your input. But the whole positive and negative ratio and actually doing that effectively can result in rapid change. I mean, rapid change with some kids, because you know what, a lot of kids aren't used to getting it. And you guys already are doing some of that here, and you'll see that. So.
And when we're looking at, you know, the change of our program over time, you know, you're not going to, you know, implement PBS on day 1 and then by day 15, you know, the kid's behavior is suddenly magically good.
Right.
It doesn't really work like that. What we really see is now, you know, when we look back at what we were doing 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago, some of the things that were happening, we're like, wow, I can't believe that was happening then. You know, compared to where this is at now, I can't believe that we even had that as a consequence. That's not even an issue anymore. And so it's been really nice to kind of be able to look back now that we've been there long enough and say, okay, yeah, we have actually had some really long-lasting positive changes in our environment and culture at the detention center.
The only other thing is I was thinking, and I'll talk, actually, if you want to hang up here, I'll talk a little about Shawnee County, and then I want to address together with you some of the things that I've experienced with Shawnee County, and maybe with you on the transition from kind of some of the tough transition issues that, and you touched on it a little bit. So is that okay, guys? Are we good on that? Okay. So Shawnee County is actually also doing this. They have their leadership team developed. They've actually developed their intervention model, their matrix, their expectations. They're just getting ready to do their actual training that we said that would be a little bit down the road for you guys when we're ready to go. So the reason, so once you implement positive behavior support, something that will happen down the road is something called, I don't want to get into it too much, but it's an evaluation tool that will come in and actually look at the facility, see how well it's being implemented. Then you guys will also get that data, so you'll kind of have an ongoing kind of scorecard, which will never be perfect, because I always get nervous. Somebody showed me like a 98% on one once, and I'm like, oh, that's not right. Because I've never seen one before that over 85, 90%, because it's continually, you should be continually having to work on stuff. So there'll be a mechanism to measure how well things are going. And that should give you a clue that it's not going away. This isn't like a flavor of the month kind of thing. This is a long process that we're going to have a mechanism to continue to make sure things are in place. Cool, a couple things about Shawnee County, that part of that change of culture when we first started working with their team. Some of the things they're considering right now changing, that is pretty, and they are a larger facility, so they're, I think, closer to your size. Also, are you guys familiar with Shawnee County's facility and how it looks? Kind of, it looks more like a jail. I mean, it's got more of it. It's got a jail feel. It definitely doesn't have the wood walls with the things around.
It's actually attached to the adult jail. It's separate, but they're all part of the same building.
And when a kid turns 18, they get walked in a tunnel underground to the adult side. So I mean, it's a little more intense, just the physical environment. So they've been talking about environmental changes. They're talking about, you know, recognizing that they're working with youth, a lot of them that have disabilities or other challenges. So they're still trying to, you know, hold those youth accountable, but teach them the skills they need. But they're talking about some changes like painting murals on in the gym walls, you know, know, like with expectations. They're talking about kind of softening the approach. They're talking about their guards shifting to more uniforms like you guys have, so that it's not, you know, because they're talking about with it being so close to the jail right next door, that these kids are like, oh, I'm just basically in jail. You know, so not that they aren't still in a lockdown facility, but they're trying to figure out these environmental things. And one point I want to really make with this is a really cool shift that we had. They are moving their level system, and they're going with this PBS model that's used in schools and purely doing that. When they first adopted that, they still put on the top, they had a list of all the different things they were going to reinforce, and then they had on the bottom some things that they were going to continue to find kids for. After a discussion, and they talked through that, it came up that why do they need the fines? You know, if they're going to reinforce those behaviors. So what they're doing is they're going to move forward with input from their staff to implement without having the fine system, but still having their hearing and sanction system to keep kids safe. But they're transitioning, going ahead and starting with that to teach staff. So, but the concerns that came up during that process was, how are we going to do that? We've got to make sure staff feel confident with that, because staff might have some concerns. When that new model I just talked about was presented to staff, again through that feedback loop, guess what? A few staff said, well, wait a minute, you can't take away, or we can't do that because I'm worried. And immediately, I think to those staff's surprise, is they got an email right back, and they actually got feedback back from the leadership team saying how we were trying to address their needs. So I want to say that because throughout this process, you're going to continue to have an opportunity to provide feedback. That doesn't mean that if a couple of you say, or if a few people say, no, I don't want to do that, that it's not going to happen. It means that there will be asked, you know, you'll be asked about your concerns and try to figure out how to adapt that system. So Shawnee County is kind of in the early stages of, hey, there's still some staff that aren't sure they are down with it yet, but most of the staff aren't on board. But the team is still being responsive to those other staff. But it is a process, and that's why it's really important to understand that feedback loop. So I don't know if you want to speak to just a few things like you touched on a little bit, but how that culture shift kind of occurred in the beginning.
Sure. So, you know, at first we did essentially exactly what you guys are doing here, where, you know, we kind of had been working on PBS for a while on the administrative side of things, and we took it to staff, said this is what it is, these are some of the ideas of how we want to use it. And then we kind of broke down into shifts and talked about, you know, how we thought it would be able to be implemented in shifts. And, you know, that early feedback was really important, because, you know, if I have a lot of great ideas, but they're ridiculous, you know they're not going to work, then rather than, you know, just arbitrarily making you guys do them, you know, I can take your feedback and say, okay, you have the actual experience of working with the kids day to day, so, you know, tell me if this is going to work or not. So that's super important. So we sat down and talked about how it was going to work. And then it was just a gradual, you know, I think it took time for staff to see kind of, like I said, the behavior changes aren't overnight, but, you know, once you're coming to work and, you know, it's more pleasant to come to work because the kids are more pleasant to be around, you have better relationships with them, you're having less codes and incidents. It's just a nicer place to work, and you don't have to, you know, dread coming to work. You can look forward to it instead. And I think that that's where a lot of staff are at this point. You know, it's really, it's a more positive environment overall, not just for the kids, but for staff as well. So, great. But it was a long process. You know, we've been doing this for a number of years now, and you know, we still make changes every quarter if we need to. We still look at the data every quarter, and you know, it's going to be kind of a living project as long as we're